Howdy, my name is Callum, also known as Northern Dice, and today I'm going to be giving you a review of Pier 18 by Alley Cat Games, a 2 to 3 player set collection tableau building game that takes about 10 to 15 minutes to play. This copy of Pier 18 was sent to us by Alley Cat Games for review. We have not been paid for this media, and all opinions that we give during this review are going to be our own. Here is the box for Pier 18. As you can see, it is incredibly thin, and it is just consistent of 18 cards. Now, the game is very light, very easy to access, but it's one of those that isn't necessarily hard to master, but it's hard to make those decisions best, because you can be very good at the game, but it doesn't necessarily mean you'll always deal well with the cards that are dealt. So there is an element of mastery to it, but we'll come into that based on what cards you draw. So the cards on the game all look very similar in that they contain elements from these 4 symbols, as you can see across. So in this one, where we've got all 4, we have poets, fishermen, florists and lovers. And each of these scores differently based on who they are. So poets, you get 1 point for every 2. Fishermen, you get 1 point for every single one on the side where there are the most. Florists, they give you 1 point for everyone else around them, whereas lovers give you 2 points if there are no people within 2 spaces of them. And those points are added up at the end of the game as part of the scoring, but there are other elements included as well. On the back, there is a brief summary of how the scoring works as well. Now, to start the game, players all need to be dealt 3 cards. So an example, we'll just take these 3, and we need to make 2 decisions with these. We need to decide which of these is going to be the base of our pier. So that will go right at the bottom. We need to decide which of these is going to be our secret objective. So in example, every single card has a secret objective. For these 3, we'll score 4 bonus points at the end of the game if we have 5+ fishers in a 2-player game, and in a 3-player game, 4+ fishers. For this one, we get 4 extra points for the same amount of poets on either side of the pier, and for this one, we get 4 points if there are more fishermen and lovers than poets and flower sellers. The game is about that mastery and making sure that you're working towards those secret objectives. So choosing a card to start with is going to help you. So we are going to choose this one for fishermen, and we are going to have this as our secret objective. And this card goes back into the general supply and is shuffled in. And then from that, players then take turns to deal out 1 card for every single player, plus 1. And then they take turns to decide which of those they're going to add to their pier. So there's the bottom of our pier. I'm going to choose this one, this player chooses this one, this player chooses this one, and we can then add them to our piers. And we can choose to add them at any sort of staggered element. So you can see it's got these little railing guards. Those are like your guide as to where it can go, because then everything just sort of fits seamlessly and it becomes one continuous path, which I think is a gorgeous art element. And of course you can then extend it further, move it up. You can have it as a really long pier or a really short pier. But remember, you aren't going to score for having the longest pier, you'll score for the elements within and your secret objective. But this final card, that no one's taken, becomes a patron. And the way patrons work is it's an extra bonus point at the end of the game if you can match the most of these symbols against what pier you've got at the moment. So if we were to win this because we had the most florists and fishermen, we would get this like that as an extra point. On the off chance that there is a tie, it would be the date at your top of your pier being closest to the date at the top of the patron card. The game ends once there are not enough cards to distribute so that everybody would get one and there'd be a patron, and at that point you would then add all your cards up. So if we were to work against this, we would add up all our poet score, lover score, florist score, fisherman score. We then add on the bonus points for our secret objective if we got that, remembering that the secret objective for the final move gets placed at the top of the pier. So it's always worth making sure that that works really well with what you've got. And then finally you get 1 point for every patron that you've got at the end of the game as well. The winner is the person who has the effective, highest scoring and best pier. And that is Pier 18 in a nutshell. So Pier 18, like I'm hoping to make this review, is quite short and sweet. The game lasts 10 to 15 minutes max, and you are never going to have it on the table for too long. It's one of those, you get it out, you play it, it's done with, and there's opportunity to pack it away, and it takes next to no time to set up or pack away for that matter. But it's not a filler game. It is a proper pub game. It's the sort of game that you get out on a small table with two other people and play and just enjoy. It's nice, it's thinker, there's a lot to it, but it doesn't have much player interaction. But I think that weighs into its advantage in that there is no opportunity to really spite or take advantage or go against anybody. It's very chill in its entire play and feel. In terms of gameplay, I love the fact that you are almost collecting sets of people to build up this endgame goal score and also overall score without needing to pick and choose. The layering of cards I think is great. I think it's fantastic that you can cover certain bits, particularly when you're trying to score for those lovers who need two spaces either side because they're a bit picky. But also with that, the fact that you are able to layer the pier as long as you want without any consequence is also brilliant. Because if you're looking to have the maximum number of people on your pier, you just make the pier as long as physically possible. Whereas if you're wanting quite a short pier because you're wanting very bespoke elements, you're wanting very specific things there, again, the layering works really well. But at the end, it looks like an actual just solid state thing. The cards artwork is so beautifully done that they layer so perfectly to the point where it is just one long entity. And I think that's really to its credit. It does make it quite an aesthetically pleasing game. The symbols themselves work really well to be identifiable against each other, and the scoring is very easy to grasp when you've grasped it. When I say when you've grasped it, that's not to say it's not an easy game. I would definitely say this is absolutely entry level. You can easily play this game with a very brief knowledge of how the scoring works and what you want to do to get a good score with the endgame scoring as well. After that, you just need someone else to score it for you. It took us 2 games to get the scoring nailed, and after that, the games were just flying. We were getting a game down to 5 minutes and just repeating it over and over. And because the setup and pack down is so swift, simple and easy, it meant that it was a game that was no stress. You could say to someone, do you want to play Pier 18? And there'd never be a no, because there's no real struggle with it. Tactically, you can always see what cards are available for everybody. There's always one plus the number of players, and that gives you option and choice. And this is the bit where there is a slight element of player interaction. You are able to make sure that your opponents don't get certain cards because you can see that they've got more emblems of something than they seem to be collecting. We always played it that our secret objectives were public just because it was easier, and whilst we were learning, it just fit better when we were trying to make sure we had the right tactics available and people knew what the consequences of taking certain things were. After that, it became a standardised thing, and we could easily see that if someone was going for more lovers, well, they're going to try and go for the card with more lovers. When we played it private, that's when the hate drafting came in. Weirdly, it was when we could see people were trying to get more fishermen that we started trying to take the cards with them to stop them from getting them. And also, making sure that you've got the best 2 dates available to you that are close to each other to make sure you get the patron points as well. If you can see there's 2 cards with June on, you want to take one of them and hope the other one remains. Or if you're last player, make sure that you get one of them. But again, it never seemed to come into it. There's opportunity, and we saw it once or twice, but it never really felt aggressive or nasty. It just feels like a very calm, relaxing game about building piers with your friends in the Victorian times. Which brings me on to the theme and the artwork. Artwork, gorgeous. Love it. I absolutely love it. It fits together so beautifully to build that long entity that just makes it really delightful and really aesthetic to look at. The theme, however, is a bit weird. You are 18th century Victorian pier builders and you are building piers. It's a theme I've never experienced, but at the same time it's not one that I think is a bad theme for the actual mechanics and play of the game. I don't think it's one that you could either replace either. I do feel like the game works well in that realm of 18th century Victorian pier builders. I don't think you could remove it and change it into ladder builders or make it bridge builders because it doesn't make sense. And especially when you consider that piers were a big thing in the 18th century Victorians and everything does sort of just fit into that really lovely thing of everything's very gentle. You've got poets on the pier writing poems, you've got lovers on the pier trying to be separate from each other. Loads of fishermen on one side because that's where the best fish are. Who's the other one? The flower sellers wanted as much of a crowd around them to sell the flowers. Everything just works, and it works within that theme. But it's not one I've experienced. I don't think 18th century pier building will ever be a theme itself, But I think it works well in this game, and I think it works quite well. It's just a bit... It's a hard sell when you're trying to get people to play. Do you want to play a game about building piers in the Victorian times? As I've already said, the complexity of this game is in completely entry level. There is absolutely no complications with getting it. As long as you know you need the most of certain symbols, how the symbols work in some capacity, and you've got someone who knows how to score, you're going to be absolutely fine riding this. Where I would say that the complexity comes in is when you're trying to look for 3 players. Now, it's not something I normally talk about with player count, but I do feel like it's a bit of an issue for me. 2 to 3 players is that really strange realm where a game isn't a solo game and a game doesn't play for 5 plus players. You've got that 2 to 4 player standardised game where most games sit. 2 to 3 players is very obscure. 3 plus players, absolutely. You can probably manage that. But I have only managed to play Pier 18 successfully, routinely, at 2 players. When I've played it at 3 players, it's because I have almost shoehorned it into a games night and said, oh, while that person's left, she'll just quickly play this. And yeah, it's a game that you can get at in that amount of time. But without making someone feel excluded or being able to have, I don't know, a tournament or a round robin going, 2 to 3 players just feels like a very obscure number. It works in the game, and mechanically it works, and for the number of cards, it works. But for being able to play it routinely, and to be able to play it lots, 3 players is a very obscure number. That's just my 2 cents on the matter, and there's no downplay on the game whatsoever. We've just not managed to successfully get a 3-player game going. You may have 2 specific friends that you always play with. We, generally speaking, have a group of 4, and I guess that's just where the actual falling in for which game groups is it going to be for falls. So who is the game actually for? Well, anyone. I don't think there's actually a sort of barrier or entry-levelness for this. I know I always say in my reviews, if you are a hardcore gamer or if you're a very light gamer, you're looking for something in the middle, but this game just sort of fits into everything. It's a game that you could easily take to the pub, it's a game you can take on the train, it's a game that you can have as a warm-up, it's a game that you can have for just, you've got 5 minutes spare, let's just have a quick go at something. The pack down and setup's so simple and so straightforward, the pack itself just slides open, you've got all the rules on there, there's no extra bits of paper, it's just crack it open, got the cards, give them a shuffle, deal them done. And I think that's what its greatest selling point is, how perfect it is as that pub, small table, quick fire game. Alongside its complexity, low rating, I'd say it's an instant no-brainer for anybody who does need that extra little game in their life. If I were to push myself to say who it's not for, well, apart from saying the classic hardcore gamers or people looking for the next big heavy, I'd really just have to push it for people who don't like pier building in the Victorian times, which seems very obscure, but again, I never thought I'd be playing a game about building piers in the 18th century Victorian times, so... swings and roundabouts, I guess. I have really enjoyed reviewing Pier 18, and it is a game that has not left my actual jacket pocket. But again, that's another delightful thing. It doesn't need to go in my bag. I can just keep it in my jacket and just play it whenever I want with someone. I've got off track immediately. With that just shows how much I enjoyed it, I guess. Is it a game that I'm going to constantly go to? It probably wear around after time, but that's not to say it isn't enjoyable and it isn't something that I won't just pick up and take with me. If you are wanting just a quick travel game or something incredibly light, or you are one of those very strange abstract people who are dying to build piers, and lucky enough in the Victorian times, I've got a great game for you. It's Pier 18. Thank you ever so much for sticking around in this review. It's been as short and sweet as I can make it between rambling. As always, I'll catch you next time.